Kira TH pressed her three-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of the rescue pod and watched through the tiny viewport as her ship disappeared into the black. The engines flared bright blue for just a moment, and then nothing. Just stars and endless darkness. She'd known this was coming. When the main reactor failed and the emergency systems started shutting down one by one, she'd seen Captain Velron doing the math. 23 crew members. Oxygen for maybe 15 if they stretched it. The choice was simple, really. Save the experienced crew. The engineers who'd worked for decades. The navigators who knew the trade routes by heart. The senior staff who had families waiting. Not the junior engineers like her. Not the ones who'd only been on board for 6 months. Article 47 of Galactic Maritime Law made it all legal. When life support fails and there aren't enough resources, you save who you can. The lowest ranks get the pods. Maybe they'd get lucky. Maybe someone would find them. Probably not. She'd watched them seal her into this coffin without much ceremony. Velron had touched her shoulder once. A gesture that meant nothing and everything. Then the hatch closed and she felt the mechanical thunk as the pod ejected into space. Now she was alone. The distress beacon blinked red in the corner of her vision. One flash every 5 seconds. It would keep flashing until the battery died, probably long after she did. The signal was weak, though. Her pod was old, a backup that hadn't been maintained properly. The beacon might reach a few thousand kilometers. Maybe. She pulled up the navigation display with shaking fingers. The numbers confirmed what she already knew. She was drifting in the Terran border zone. That's what they called this region of space now. The area where humans operated. Most species avoided it completely. Humans didn't follow the rules. They didn't respect galactic authority. They were aggressive, territorial, and worst of all, completely unpredictable. The Council had spent years trying to understand them and failed. Humans did things that made no logical sense. They took risks no sane species would take. The nearest galactic authority station was 3 weeks away at best. Her oxygen gauge read 98% right now, but that number was a lie. She had maybe 4 days if she was lucky. For days if she didn't move around too much. For days if she kept her breathing slow and steady. No one was coming. Not in time. Kira TH was Velcari, and her people didn't panic. They looked at facts. They accepted reality. Death was just another variable in the equation of life. She'd always known she might die young. Space was dangerous. Accidents happened. The universe didn't care about fairness. She opened her personal logs and started recording. Her voice sounded strange in the small pod, bouncing off the metal walls. She spoke about the mathematical proofs she'd been working on, theoretical equations about faster-than-light travel that no one had solved yet. She was close to something. She knew it, but now someone else would have to finish the work. Then she recorded a message for her clutch mates, her sister Tefare, who wanted to be an engineer too, her brother Kovan, who'd warned her not to take this job. She told them she loved them, that she hoped they lived long and fulfilling lives, that they shouldn't be sad. This was just mathematics, just probability catching up with her. When she finished recording, she sat in silence for a long time. The pod was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. 3 hearts, actually, all beating slightly out of sync like they always did. She looked at the control panel. Most systems were already in low-power mode. She could shut down even more. The heating, the internal lights, everything except the beacon and life support. It might buy her a few more hours. Not that it mattered. The darkness would be better anyway. Easier to meditate. Easier to prepare for what came next. Her people had practiced the death meditation for thousands of years. It was supposed to bring peace, acceptance, a calm transition from life to whatever came after. She'd learned it as a child, but never thought she'd need it so soon. Kira TH powered down the lights. The pod went black except for the tiny blinking beacon. Red flash. Darkness. Red flash. Darkness. She closed her eyes and started the breathing exercises. Slow inhale through the left breathing tube. Hold. Exhale through the right. Her hearts began to sync up, beating together in the ancient rhythm of her species. For days of oxygen. For days of silence. For days of waiting for the end, in a tiny metal coffin floating through space that humans claimed as their own, she wondered briefly what humans would think if they found her. Probably nothing. They'd probably just ignore a dead Valkyrie in a pod. Why would they care? The beacon kept flashing, on and off, calling out to the empty void where no one was listening. Kira TH didn't remember when day 1 ended and day 2 began. Time stopped meaning anything in the darkness. She'd wake up gasping, then realize she'd been asleep. Or maybe she'd been awake the whole time. It was getting harder to tell the difference. The oxygen gauge read 52% now. She stared at it, watching the number flicker. Her mind felt fuzzy around the edges, like someone had wrapped her thoughts in thick cloth. That was the hypoxia starting. Not enough oxygen reaching her brain. It would get worse. She saw her mentor Tekval standing in the corner of the pod. He looked exactly like he had on her graduation day, his scales gleaming silver under the academy lights. He was nodding at her, clicking his approval. "You were my best student," he said. "You're not real," Kiritage whispered. Her voice sounded strange and far away. "Does it matter?" Tekval tilted his head. "Talk to me about the Chinvastra equations. You said you were close to solving them." So she did. She talked out loud in the darkness, explaining her theories about faster-than-light mathematics, the numbers that didn't quite work yet, the variables she couldn't balance. Tekval listened like he always had, patient and thoughtful. Sometimes he asked questions, good questions that made her think. It took her almost an hour to realize she was having a conversation with empty air. The hallucinations came and went after that. Sometimes Tekval, sometimes her sister Tefare, laughing at a joke Kiritich couldn't remember telling. Once she saw her father, but he didn't speak. He just stood there looking disappointed, and that hurt worse than anything. She knew none of it was real. The Valkyrie didn't fear death because they understood it. Death was just biology failing, just chemistry stopping, just mathematics reaching its conclusion. Her brain was running out of oxygen and creating phantoms to fill the emptiness. That was all. But understanding something and experiencing it were different things. What bothered her most wasn't the dying. It was the silence. She'd read about Earth's ancient ocean sailors once, back in the academy. How they crossed vast seas in wooden ships, pushed by wind. How they feared something called the doldrums more than any storm. Places where the wind stopped, where the ocean became like glass, where ships sat motionless for days or weeks, supplies running low, water running out, just waiting in the terrible quiet. Now she understood what those sailors felt. The storms were almost easier. Action, crisis, something to fight against. But this silence was different. It pressed against her from all sides. It got inside her head. It made her aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every second ticking away. She checked the comm channels because she had nothing else to do. Her fingers moved across the controls automatically, scrolling through frequencies she'd memorized years ago. Galactic Standard Channel, static. Commercial shipping lanes, static. Emergency frequencies, static. She tried the trade routes next. Usually there was at least some chatter. Ships calling to stations. Automated beacons marking hazards. Even the background noise of civilization traveling through space. Nothing. She even checked the pirate channels, the encrypted frequencies that smugglers and raiders used, the ones the Galactic Authority pretended not to know about. Surely someone would be out here. Pirates didn't care about borders or danger zones. Still nothing. Nobody came through human space unless they had no other choice. The Galactic Council said it was because humans hadn't fully integrated into civilized society yet, that they needed more time to understand proper protocols and procedures. But Kira TH had read the classified reports, the ones junior engineers weren't supposed to see but always found anyway. She knew the real reason. Humans were unpredictable. They didn't follow patterns other species could understand. They made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. They took insane risks for reasons that made no mathematical sense. They'd fight when they should retreat. They'd help when they should ignore. They'd laugh at threats that should terrify them. The Galactic Council didn't know how to deal with that, How do you negotiate with a species that might hug you or shoot you depending on variables you couldn't calculate? How do you trade with people who valued honor over profit? How do you trust beings who die for complete strangers? You didn't. You just avoided them. So nobody traveled through human territory. Nobody would hear her distress beacon. Nobody would find her floating in this metal coffin. Kira TH looked at the oxygen gauge again. 31% now. The number glowed red in the darkness. Red like warning lights. Red like the beacon that kept flashing uselessly. Her breathing was getting harder. Each inhale took more effort than the last. Her 3 hearts were working overtime, trying to pump oxygen that wasn't there to her brain. Her thoughts kept drifting away like smoke. She closed all 3 of her eyes. Time to stop fighting. Time to accept what was coming. The death meditation was older than recorded Valkyrie history. Every child learned it. Every adult practiced it. A way to face the end with dignity and peace. Breathing patterns that slowed the hearts. Mental exercises that calmed the mind. Acceptance of the inevitable. She never thought she'd need it at 20 cycles old. But here she was. Kira TH began the first breathing sequence. In through the left tube. Hold for 5 heartbeats. Out through the right. Her heart started to sink, beating together in the ancient rhythm. The silence pressed closer. The darkness was complete. The universe was vast and empty and didn't care that she was dying. She continued breathing. In and out, slowly, steadily, preparing for the end. The beacon kept flashing. Red light in the darkness. On and off, calling out to space where nobody was listening. Or so she thought. The proximity alarm screamed in the darkness. Kira TH jerked awake, her heart's hammering wildly. That was impossible. She'd shut down the sensors. There was nothing left to trigger an alarm. She was hallucinating again. Had to be, but the alarm kept screaming. Her fingers fumbled across the controls, barely able to make them work. The display flickered to life and showed something that couldn't be real. A ship. Close. Too close. Active scanners washing over a pod like searchlights. She tried to focus her 3 eyes, but everything was blurry. The oxygen gauge read 29%. She was seeing things. This wasn't happening. Then her calm crackled to life with a voice. A human voice speaking Galactic Standard with a strange accent. Unknown pod, this is HMS Defiant. We're receiving your distress signal. Don't panic. We're coming to get you. Kira TH tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her breathing tubes felt like they were full of sand. Stay with us, the voice continued. We're going to cut you out. Might be loud. Just hold on. The cutting started 30 seconds later. The sound was incredible, even to the pod's walls. High-pitched whining that made her want to cover her hearing organs. Sparks flew past the viewport. The whole pod shook and vibrated. She'd expected a rescue to take hours, if it happened at all. Careful cutting. Proper procedures. Safety checks. That's how Galactic Authority did it. The humans tore through a pod like it was paper. 90 seconds from start to finish. The hatch peeled away and suddenly there was light. Bright, terrible light that hurt her eyes. A figure in a pressure suit loomed over her, backlit like something from a dream. Hey there. The voice was gentle, completely different from what she expected. I'm Miho. I'm the medic on this ship. You're going to be okay now. Kira TH tried to speak, but started coughing instead. Her lungs burned with each breath. Don't try to talk yet, Miho said. He moved into the pod, somehow fitting his large human frame into the tiny space. I'm going to put an oxygen mask on you. It might feel cold, but it'll help. Is that okay? She managed a small nod. The mask pressed against her face, and suddenly there was air. Real air, rich with oxygen. She gasped and coughed and gasped again. Her vision started to clear. That's it. Nice and easy. You're doing great. Miho kept one hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. I'm going to lift you now. My friend Jaiwin is right outside. We'll get you to medical. Just relax. Relax. That was absurd. She was being rescued by humans. Humans who were supposed to be dangerous and unpredictable. who everyone avoided, who the Galactic Council warned about. But Mio's hands were incredibly gentle as he lifted her, like she was made of glass. Another human appeared, a woman named Jaiwin, who smiled and said something encouraging that Kira TH's translator couldn't quite catch. They carried her through the human ship, and it was nothing like she expected. It should have been cold and military. Instead, it was warm. There were pictures on the walls, plants growing in containers, the smell of something cooking. The medical bay hit her like a wave. Noise everywhere. Equipment beeping and humming. Lights flashing. People moving quickly, but not frantically. Someone was playing music in the background. Something with a strong beat that Valkyrie medical facilities would never allow. They laid her on a bed that was too soft. Everything in human spaces seemed softer than it should be. Miho worked quickly, attaching monitors and scanners. But he kept talking the whole time, explaining what he was doing, apologizing when something was cold or uncomfortable, asking if she was okay. It was strange. Wrong. Humans were supposed to be rough, aggressive. Why were they treating her like she mattered? Heart rate stabilizing. Someone called out. Oxygen saturation improving. Good. That was a new voice. Kira TH turned her head and saw a woman approaching. She was shorter than Miho, with dark hair cut close to her head. Scars marked her jaw and neck. Her eyes were tired but kind. "I'm Captain Hannah," the woman said. She pulled up a chair and sat right next to the bed, close enough to touch. Humans did that. Got close. It made most species uncomfortable, but somehow Kira TH didn't mind. "You're safe now," Hannah continued. "We've already contacted your embassy. They're arranging transport. We'll get you to Port Kepler Station in about 6 days. She paused. "We've also got food compatible with Valkyrie biology. Our nutritionist is pretty good at figuring this stuff out." Kira TH's voice came out as a rasp. "Why? Why what? Why save me?" The words hurt her throat, but she forced them out. "Your species has no alliance with mine. No treaty. No obligation. I have nothing to trade. No way to pay you." Hannah's expression changed. She looked confused for a moment, then almost sad. "You needed help. That's reason enough. That's not logical." The captain laughed. Actually laughed. A warm sound that seemed to fill the medical bay. "You're probably right about that. But we're human. We stopped letting logic tell us who deserves to live a long time ago." She leaned forward slightly. "Look, I don't know what you've heard about us. We're messy. We're emotional. We make decisions that don't make sense to anyone else. But here's the thing." She tapped the armrest of her chair. "We don't leave people behind. Not when we can do something about it. It's just how we're built." Kira TH stared at her, trying to understand. This went against everything she knew about resource management, about survival calculations, about the cold mathematics of space. But she was alive, against all probability, against all logic, because humans didn't care about probability. By the second day aboard the Defiant, Kira TH realized the humans weren't going to leave her alone in the medical bay. They kept visiting, not to check her vitals or run tests, just to talk. Engineer Hyun was the first. He showed up with a deck of worn cards and a grin. "You feeling better? Good. Want to learn a game?" Kira TH had studied human recreation during her academy training. Games were considered inefficient by Valkyrie standards. Why spend time on activities with no productive outcome? But she was bored, and Hyun looked so hopeful. The game was called poker. 5 cards, different combinations worth different points, betting on who had the best hand. Hyun explained the rules twice, using his hands to demonstrate. "It's about luck and reading people," he said. "Sometimes the cards don't matter as much as how you play them." Kira TH won the first 3 rounds using pure probability calculations. She could track which cards had been played, calculate the odds of drawing specific combinations, determine optimal betting strategies. The math was actually quite elegant. Hyun laughed every time she won. Not angry or frustrated. Actually laughing. "Of course you're good at this. I should have known better than to play math games with an engineer. You're not upset?" Kira TH asked. "Why would I be upset? You're better at cards than me. Good for you. He dealt another hand. Keeps me humble. That's what my mom always says. They played for 2 hours. Hyun told her about growing up on Earth, in a city called Busan near the ocean. He showed her pictures on his datapad. Water stretching to the horizon. Buildings climbing up hillsides. Markets crowded with people. The next day, Pilot Jaiwin stopped by with food and stories. She'd been to 17 different planets in her career. She talked about crystal forests on Veltar Prime, floating cities on Corvesh, ice storms on the mining colonies. But her favorite stories were always about Earth. We have these things called waves, Jaiwin said, her eyes distant. The ocean water rolls in toward the shore, builds up, crashes down. When I was a kid, I'd spend hours just watching them, over and over, never the same wave twice. What purpose does watching serve? Kira Th asked. Jaiwin smiled. No purpose. That's the point. Sometimes you do things just because they're beautiful. The humans asked about her too, about Valkyrie hive structures, about her family, about what she studied. They listened like they actually cared, not the polite listening that other species did at diplomatic functions. Real attention, real interest. Medic Miho wanted to know about Valkyrie music. Do you have songs? Instruments. We have mathematical harmonics, Kira Th explained. Frequencies that create pleasing ratios. That counts. Miho pulled out a small device. Want to hear some human music? He played her dozens of songs over the next few days. Some were calm and peaceful. Some were loud and energetic. Some made her hearts beat faster, even though she didn't understand the words. Music that existed purely to make people feel things. On the 4th night, Captain Hannah invited her to the bridge. The observation window showed open space. Stars scattered like glitter across the darkness. Want to see something? Hannah pulled up a display. Mission logs. Rescue operations. The data scrolled past, line after line. 19 rescues in 7 months. A Krellian freighter hit by debris. For survivors pulled from the wreckage. A toll-vaunted diplomatic shuttle with failing engines. 8 rescued. A research team abandoned on a dead station. 12 saved. Miners trapped after a tunnel collapse. 7 recovered. The list went on and on. Different species. Different situations. All of them in zones where Galactic Authority wouldn't go. This is what you do. Kira Th asked quietly. One of the things we do. Hannah zoomed in on a map showing human territory. Red dots marked rescue locations. There were hundreds of them. Galactic Authority has rules about acceptable risks. They calculate whether a rescue mission is worth the resources. Sometimes they decide it's not. That people are expendable. The word hit Kira Th hard. Expendable. Like her. Like the captain who jettisoned her pod. We don't accept that, Hannah continued. Someone needs help, we help. Simple as that. But you charge fees, right? Payment for services? Hannah pulled up another file. Financial records. Sometimes people pay. Companies whose crews we save. Wealthy travelers. Governments who don't want to admit they needed human help. She scrolled down. But most can't pay. Most are like you. Wrong place, wrong time, bad luck. That's not sustainable, Kira Th said. You're spending resources with no return. Risking your crew for strangers. It's completely inefficient. Probably. Hannah leaned back in her chair. The Defiant should have been scrapped 2 years ago. We keep her running with spare parts and hope. Half our equipment is older than I am. We eat recycled rations most days. Our hull looks like it went through a war. She gestured to the crew around the bridge. Hyun at engineering. Jaiwin at the helm. Miho checking medical supplies. Young faces with old eyes. People who'd seen too much but kept going anyway. We could take corporate contracts. Hannah said, escort rich merchants. Transport luxury goods. Make real money. Sleep in comfortable beds. Eat fresh food. She looked at Kira Th. But then who saves the people nobody else will save? Kira Th stared at the rescue logs. Hundreds of lives. Beings from dozens of species who should have died in the cold mathematics of space. who lived because humans decided efficiency wasn't more important than life. How do you justify it? She asked. To yourselves, to your families. You could die doing this. Hannah smiled, sad and tired and somehow still hopeful. We sleep at night. That's how we justify it. We look in the mirror and know we did everything we could, that we didn't calculate some stranger's life away, because it was easier, because it made financial sense. She touched the console, displaying all those rescue operations. Maybe it's inefficient. Maybe we're fools. But we're human. This is what we do. Port Kepler Station grew larger in the viewport with each passing hour. Kiritich watched it approach, her 3 hearts beating in an unfamiliar rhythm. Anticipation, anxiety, something she couldn't quite name. 6 days ago, she'd been dying in a pod, accepting the mathematical certainty of her death. Now she was alive, standing on the bridge of a human ship, about to return to her people. Nervous? Captain Hannah stood beside her, hands clasped behind her back. I don't know what to feel, Kiritich admitted. My species isn't good with uncertainty. Nobody is. We just pretend better. Hannah smiled. Your embassy sent updated coordinates. They're waiting at docking bay 12. The Defiant maneuvered through the station's traffic patterns. Other ships gave them wide berth. Kiritich noticed how they changed course, how they kept distance. Everyone avoided human vessels when possible. She wondered if they'd feel differently if they knew what she knew now. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. Standard protocols, safety checks, pressure equalization. Kiritich had done this hundreds of times before, but today her hands shook. You ready? Miho appeared with her few belongings. They'd cleaned and repaired her pressure suit, recovered her data logs from the pod. Everything she thought was lost forever. The crew gathered near the airlock. Hyun, Jaiwo, and Miho, engineers and pilots and medics whose names she'd learned, who'd shared their food and stories, who'd treated her like she mattered. Thank you, she said. The words felt inadequate. How do you thank someone for your life? Stay safe out there, Hyun said. He pressed a small object into her hand. His deck of cards. Something to remember us by. And hey, if you ever want a rematch. The airlock opened. Light flooded in from the station. And there, standing in the docking bay, were her people. Ambassador Vel Crick stood at the front, his scales bright green with shock. Behind him, 3 embassy officials. Behind them, station security. All of them staring at her like she was a ghost. Because to them, she was... Kiritich stepped to the airlock on unsteady legs. The gravity felt wrong. Too heavy. Or maybe she'd just gotten used to the Defiant. Kiritich... Vel Crick's pheromones broadcast pure confusion. But how? You were declared deceased 4 days ago. The paperwork was filed. The hive was notified. I was rescued. Her voice sounded strange, speaking Velcari again after days of Galactic Standard. Rescued? By whom? He looked past her at the Defiant, at the scarred human ship that had materialized from nowhere. The Galactic authorities said no rescue was possible. The risk calculations. Humans don't calculate lives. The words came out quiet but firm. Vel Crick's scales flickered through colors. Confusion. Disbelief. Slowly shifting toward understanding. Humans did this, but they have no treaty with us. No obligation. No alliance. I know. What did you offer them? What was the payment? Nothing. They asked for nothing. The ambassador fell silent. Around them, the other Velcari exchanged pheromones. Disbelief rippled through the group. It went against everything they understood about resource management, about the economy of favors and debts that govern galactic relations. Kiritich turned back toward the airlock. Captain Hannah stood there with her crew, watching, waiting to make sure she got home safe. Wait here, Kiritich told the ambassador. She walked back to the humans. Hannah met her halfway. Everything okay? My people will know about this, Kiritich said. The hives will remember what you did, what your species does. I'll make sure of it. That's not why we... I know. That's exactly why it matters. Kiritich reached out, mimicking the human gesture Hannah had used so many times. She gripped the captain's shoulder. "Thank you, for my life, for showing me that efficiency isn't the only thing that matters." Hannah's eyes got a little wet. Humans did that when they felt strong emotions, leaked water from their eyes like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Just do one thing for us," Hannah said. Her voice was rough. "Next time someone's dying alone in the dark, break through their silence. However you can. Don't let the math be the only thing that decides who lives and who dies." "I will. I promise." The captain pulled her into a hug. Another strange human gesture. Full body contact that should have felt invasive, but somehow felt right. Safe. Like family. One by one. The crew hugged her too. Miho, who'd saved her life. Hyun, who'd taught her that games could matter. Jaiwin, who'd shared stories of waves. All these humans who become impossibly important in just 6 days. Then she was back with her people. The airlock closed. Through the viewport, she watched the Defiant begin its undocking sequence. The ship looked even more battered from the outside. Hull plates mismatched. Welds visible where repairs had been made. Scorch marks and dents and signs of 1,000 rescues that made no economic sense. "What kind of ship is that?" one of the embassy officials asked. "It looks ready to fall apart." "It's a ship that saves people," Kira TH said. "That's all that matters." She watched the Defiant maneuver away from the station, watched its engines glow blue as it headed back toward human territory, back toward the zones everyone else avoided, back to find the next person dying in the darkness. And suddenly she understood what she'd been missing all along. Humanity's strength wasn't their weapons. The Galactic Council had better ones. It wasn't their technology. Dozens of species were more advanced. It wasn't even their stubbornness or aggression or unpredictability. It was simpler than that, more fundamental. Humans refused to accept that anyone should die alone. They heard the silence and broke through it. They saw the darkness and brought light. They looked at impossible odds and said, "We're doing it anyway." The math didn't matter to them. The risk calculations didn't matter. The resource management didn't matter. What mattered was a person dying in a pod. The stranger who needed help. The life that everyone else had written off as acceptable loss. The Velcari calculated. They optimized. They accepted death as statistically inevitable and philosophically necessary. Humans just said no. No to the math. No to the odds. No to the cold logic of space that said some lives weren't worth saving. Especially then. Especially when the universe said it was impossible. That's when humans tried hardest. Kira TH clutched the deck of cards in her hand and watched the Defiant disappear into the black. The scarred ship carrying its crew of fools who saved people for free, who risked everything for strangers, who slept on old bunks and ate recycled rations and kept flying into danger because someone had to. She thought about her 4 days in that pod, the silence, the acceptance, the death meditation that should have been her last act. Then she thought about Hannah's words. Break through their silence. The Defiant was gone now, but its message remained. Nobody dies alone. Not if humans have anything to say about it. Not ever.